So True Detective Episode 6, Hunters in the Dark, opens in the 80s timeline right after Wayne and Amelia first have sex. And this is the same day of the shootout. And what this conversation comes to is that this is the first time Wayne used a weapon on the job. And this leads to Amelia wanting to know about his past in the war, because he's clearly shot weapons there. How did he get where he is? And he says he doesn't like to remember about it. He doesn't give it much thought. And Amelia says, that's a superpower to me. I could never do that. So there's some really good writing here. It's also a be careful what you wish for situation, because Wayne, when he's an old man, will have that superpower to the fullest extent where he doesn't remember almost anything. So it kind of makes you think a bit how much of it is actually a little bit of a blessing. So in the 90s timeline, we resume right where we left off, where we see the aftermath of Julie's phone call. And now this makes Tom look really bad, and the other officers bring up he has no alibi for after 6:30 the night Julie went missing. So Wayne and Roland decide to go handle this themselves and confront him about it in front of everybody, instead of having the other cops that are coming in hot do it. But this really puts Roland in a bad spot, because he's helped Tom change his life around at this point and is friends with the guy. And this episode showed you the glaring problem with having any relationships with somebody involved in a case you are covering, because now it's a conflict of interest here. And you can see it's actually taking Roland off his game this whole episode. So then Wayne actually brings up to Tom the peephole, which made my stomach drop. And Wayne's like, were you worried it isn't yours? We know Lucy got around a lot. So this is when Wayne becomes super aggressive and can be harsh. But he's got to put this on, especially for the cops watching. And this is a great scene for a show like this, because as the audience, you're getting to see a very suspicious character in Tom be fully confronted. And it really progresses his storyline a bit, and any suspicions you have if he's the guy or not. We learned a lot in this episode, and this episode was really the actor who plays Tom, Scoot McNairy's, showing of his acting abilities. The guy is always underrated, and he steps up to the plate every time, and this was his episode to steal. He was great. I mean, look at when he completely has the meltdown, when he screams at the end. That wasn't overacting. That was really felt, especially when you have your buddy Roland now losing faith in you and asking you questions. I mean, this is your daughter now. You're being questioned about killing who you've been mourning over. So it's a crazy situation. He's portraying that well, and he does it in a way that makes you not hate him, but not also super trust him and like him. I can't sing his praises enough. So we get such a beautiful transition here where in the 90s timeline, Wayne is looking through this glass at Tom, but you see the reflection of his older self in the glass, and it transitions so beautifully to him in 2015 as this old man looking down and actually thinking about that situation that happened that day. That is some awesome editing and really well thought out directing. And when we're in this 2015 timeline again, where he's being interviewed about the case, Mahershala is just mesmerizing as usual. It's all in his eyes. And this guy is showing you, I felt, how much of this is really dementia and losing memory, and how much of this is just severe trauma he hasn't dealt with in his life catching up to him. Because the way he's playing it isn't fully just one disease he's dealing with. There's a lot of mental handicaps there. So here he confirms that it was Julie who called, and it was from a truck stop. So in the 90s, we see Wayne and Roland at this truck stop, and he says an important line to Roland here, that he didn't want to tell the cops about him thinking the backpack was planted because he didn't want them to use that against Tom yet. So he knows there's a lot of bad looking stuff here for Tom, but he wants to reserve it so they don't go overboard and just convict him without further evidence, showing you how good of a cop Wayne is, because he really is the true detective, because he's literally looking for the truth, not just an easy person to blame. So back at home, we see Amelia is working on a sequel to her book that would talk about the current investigation that's happening. And I like them going with that angle, because it's something very realistic with books like Amelia's writing. There's always a follow-up because more events happen. You see with documentaries too. They just fall into a rabbit hole of it. And she says it's a new opportunity, and Wayne snaps at this. But she says, oh no, that's what the publisher said, not me. They use those words. But she's really thinking that. She's a full opportunist, and Wayne calls her out on it again. Like, hey, this isn't just all about making a book on this. This is my life. This is a serious case. These are real people. But she argues back, you can't expect the world to cave to your morals. So I'm starting to see where this hate from a lot of you guys towards Amelia is coming from now, and she's becoming way less likable as this goes on. She acts selfless, but you can tell she puts her book over everything else, just as guilty as Wayne puts his career over everything else. So then some big information is revealed where Roland and Wayne go to Tom's job, and the boss explains coworkers got wind of him going to a queer club. Very hard to understand what this character was saying. I had to replay that scene like 5 times to hear him say queer club. That's always a tick of mine when something's not pronounced super clear, but anyway, after breaking through that, knowing this, coworkers got hard on him because of it, and this is a big reveal. This changes how we think of Tom now. His perspective from where he's coming from is going to be different than we thought. So the pacing in this episode is just excellent. It's moving at a good pace. It's the most exciting one so far, and that's shown here because right when they learn this information about Tom, they immediately show us Wayne and Roland at his house looking into it, and there's so much important stuff just told through props and visuals here about Tom's current state of mind. You're seeing the Serenity Prayer, you're seeing Alcoholics Anonymous material everywhere, and you're also seeing gambling pieces and pictures of Julie, who is clearly not over at all. But the big thing here is Roland finding in the drawer a card that says homosexuality can be cured, confirming he is gay and that he's actually trying to go against the grain and change it. So then we get another car scene with Roland and Wayne, and I gotta say these are my favorite parts of this season. Seeing these two in that close of quarters going at it is the most entertaining stuff. And here Wayne's like, hey, maybe this is Tom. Maybe it was a queer hangout spot at Devil's Den and his kids weren't supposed to be there, and he's hinting this whole idea, and this makes Roland just snap and say F off. Again, highlighting this issue of him having a friendship with now a suspect. He's not thinking clearly. Roland makes very sure if it ends up not being Tom that they clear him. And Wayne's like, sure, but we're going all the way this time. So that got you a little pumped up. And it's showing you this whole episode, the 90s timeline is the most entertaining, and it's where stuff hit the fan completely. There's so much to it. It's the most complicated story. So in the 80s timeline, we see when Wayne actually gets his first glimpse at the pictures of the backpack and a shirt from the Woodard scene. And the other officers and Kent are just basically all in now that Woodard killed both kids. It's a double murder. And Wayne's not having it, but they're giving terrible reasons. One of them insanely racist by Kent, where he's like, oh, the note was misspelled and it was cutouts from a magazine, so I guess it's Woodard. That makes no sense. And then when he asks about Julie's body missing, how could you just blame Julie being killed by him? They're like, oh, he probably burned her body. With no solid evidence, and this guy's telling Wayne it's final. This is what they're going with. And he's like, maybe we'll get a medal out of this. And Wayne's like, I don't give a crap about medals. I love this because, again, it's showing you how genuine of a detective he is and a good person. All he cares about is justice and finding Julie. And the best writing here was when Ken says that Woodard killed 10. And Wayne's like, I think you mean 12, if you're going to pin it on the kids as well. So he's totally calling them out there because that's showing you they don't even believe what they're saying and making this up. And he's like, get your story straight. Love that. Go Wayne. So back to the 90s timeline, Wayne and Roland go to Hoyt to meet with Harris James, the former cop who ID'd the backpack belonging to Will. And they confront him about working at Hoyt now and his new job. And he's giving all bad answers to their questions. They're all beating around the bush and they're just jokes, really. A perfect example of this is them asking why it took 2 days to find that backpack at the Woodard scene. And he's like, hey, it took God 6 days to build the world. Just sounds like a guilty person. And they know it. And Wayne has a great question here and he's like, what's the job involved that you're making money like that? So again, he's alluding to something else is up, that he's getting paid that much for what he does. And this guy reads Wayne back too, and then he says, man, do I miss cruising around eating donuts all day. And maybe my favorite line of the season is Wayne saying back, I don't eat donuts. And then we get a really creepy line back from Harris James where he's like, I can tell you have a nice body, detective. Like, what? And Wayne's totally off put by it too. And then them thinking about this afterwards, Roland has a great line where he's like, I thought God built the world in 7 days. And Wayne's like, no, he rested the 7th day. But he should have put in the 7th day and not done a half-effort job here. And it's such great writing because none of these lines feel out of character. Of course, a workaholic like Wayne would say a line like this. So here in 2015, the interviewers come with the hard questions now to Wayne, specifically saying that Harris went missing during the 90s investigation. And Wayne's like, huh, what happened to him? And adjusts his glasses. Oh boy. So I'm gung-ho on thinking that Wayne and Roland, what they did, which they alluded to last episode, something bad, was they took care of Harris James themselves because the police wouldn't. And she's just going in at the soft spot of Wayne, and now we're getting a real idea of what her angle is. She thinks Wayne clearly did something and knows something that he's not telling. And she's like, I wonder if they will drain a quarry with him in it one day. And now she's really accusing him to his face, which is a bold move, especially if you're trying to get information out of this guy. And now she's bringing another angle where she's like, have you sat back and thought about the sheer number of vitality surrounding this case? So she's looking at big picture. We've learned throughout this episode that Tom is dead. We know Amelia is dead. Harris James dead. Dan O'Brien dead. So it's a big, big operation going on. And Wayne knows that deep down. And that's got to be part of his regret that they didn't follow that enough. But it's definitely her idea of it. And now it's really all pointing to this Hoyt corporation. What kind of, I guess, maybe what she mentioned before, pedophile type situation, like a ring going on. So we get a scene here in the 90s timeline where Amelia is doing her rogue investigating and goes and sees a nun at a place where they hold kids who run away, specifically girls at this location. And she meets someone who was actually in the same house as Julie 4 or 5 months ago. And she brings up her talking about the pink rooms and living there, being a queen, a pink castle. And there's an interesting shot where this girl looks at a gardener outside and says, if you want to write a good book, write about what happens to kids out here, what happens to girls. She says that right after they show the shot of her looking at that gardener man. So there's some bad stuff going on, and it's a big thing. And with younger women, they wouldn't show that shot for no reason. So then we see Roland and Wayne go see Dan O'Brien, and now he looks like a complete psycho in the 90s, and he acts like one, and we know this guy was a meth head, and he's got information, he says, but he wants money for it. And we get two big reveals here. There are people who want to make sure your questions don't get answered. The same people who want to make it look like Lucy OD'd. So, okay, was Lucy murdered? And they're catching on that right away. And then the other big thing was Dan saying that Lucy doesn't know when to stop. She just keeps going, keeps pushing and pushing. It makes me think now, this was a situation where Lucy may have given Julie up or given information about her to someone who shouldn't have had it for drugs. And we're learning here that other people besides them are looking for Julie. Has to be the Hoyt farm people. It's this whole corrupt thing going on. And it's just scummy of Dan, who is the uncle here, trying to get money out of this and not just giving answers that could help Julie. But great performance by the actor of Dan here. I love when an actor can just transform like that from what we first saw him in the 80s timeline to this guy in the 90s. It's a complete different character, and he nails both. So props to him. Now, Tom overhears at the police station cops talking about Wayne and Roland's requests from them, information about the motel that Lucy was at, the phone calls, and where Dan could be. And I wasn't so crazy about this because this is a very happenstance situation where, oh, it's perfect timing that Tom would go upstairs and overhear that exact tidbit of conversation. It's kind of a cheat with writing. So be it, just not crazy about it. So here in 2015, we see Wayne with his son, and he actually confronts his son about him fooling around with the interviewer. He's cheating on his wife. She doesn't know about it. He feels somewhat bad about it. And Wayne's going into something like, hey, did I make you become a withholding person? I didn't realize that was happening. And he talks about from the day his son was born, it made him a coward. And it gets very touchy here. However, unlike last week's touching scene with Roland and Wayne, this felt a little more cheesy to me, a little more forced. And again, I'm not buying the acting by the son. I don't know if Mahershala's just making him look bad, but I don't see an array of emotions ever happening. I don't see him actually believing everything he's saying or fully understanding his character, because it's not helping. He's not portraying it to us. It's very wooden. You can even tell he was struggling when he was about to cry there. He's just not the chops yet. So then we get a great scene in the 90s where Wayne and Roland again are in the car, the best scenes, and they get into an argument because Roland's like, I'm driving you home now, Wayne. And Wayne's like, I'm not done working. And Roland says some mean stuff to him, and Wayne goes, pull over, stop the effing car. And Roland's the best line here. He's like, what are you, a prom queen? I hurt your feelings, you're gonna storm off now? And he actually gets out of the car. I was howling at this. This whole scene was great. I love Wayne actually showing his very sensitive side again and how emotional he is, again with the character consistencies. And it's refreshing to see a male lead that's more emotional and sensitive like that. And he just keeps walking and Roland leaves. That was great. So then we see Tom confronts Dan here with a gun and is asking him what he's trying to sell to the cops. What information does he have? Confronts him about the peephole. And Scoot McNairy is killing it here. He's playing a guy who's drinking again. He's rageful. He's broken down. He's at his wit's end, pointing a gun at this guy. Props, props, props. I thought for a second when he was beating Dan that he was actually going to kill this guy. To me, this really shows Tom has to be innocent. Not actually killing Julie. Maybe some regret and some information he gave away about her. So we'll see with that. It is tough to read. But Dan's like, I didn't watch Julie through this peephole, which I believe. It's so truthful in that moment with a gun to his face. And Dan's like, how do you think Julie was getting money this whole time? So he's like, I know a man who was giving it to her. So really big information. Great, great scene. And it's really ramping up here. Very exciting. This is all great for a 6th episode of an 8-episode season. We're getting our answers now. Things are moving along. It's setting up for a really, hopefully, fulfilling finale. So now when Wayne finishes his long walk, it's nighttime. He's got to the Purcell's place. The place is a dump. There's graffiti everywhere. It's the first time we're seeing it in the 90s. But he finds that one of the notes he found actually fit through the peephole. So there's your answer to that. This person, whoever it was giving notes to Julie, comforting her. So the peephole was kind of a red herring in the sense of it wasn't what we were thinking. That was something creepy. So good writing there. That I don't think anyone called that one. Now, in the 2015 story, we see old man Roland and old man Wayne together at his place. And Wayne's saying, oh, you know, this director woman's asking me about Harris James again. And Roland's like, you sure you know what you're doing? So yeah, they did something to this guy. And Wayne's saying, you know, don't worry, even if I don't, I'll do what Dan O'Brien says, or I'm just a sick man. So he has his out. He knows that he's covering something, and if he slips up, he's just going to pin it on that. So Wayne goes to take a leak, and Roland peeks into Amelia's book with all of Wayne's notes in it. In the book, on the left side of the page, we see Amelia is writing about a story where Wayne, her, and her daughter got in some kind of car accident. Seems like they drove off a cliff. She was looking for her cell phone. It was still retained and in order. And she mentions a man named Ed that Wayne circled. So I don't know what this all could mean. We still haven't met the daughter in current time, which is going to be interesting. If anyone has theories about that specifically and what was on that page, please comment below. I'd love to hear that. And then on the right page, we see Amelia was writing about Lucy and how no parent is made to deal with losing a child and how her drugs were escape and hopefully she found peace now. Then Wayne comes in the room and he goes, Roland, how you doing? Damn, just showing that severity of him forgetting stuff. And then this whole scene has just become spooky and it's really effective. The lighting, the music, and just this camera angle of when Wayne is asking Roland if he sees a car outside. The camera kind of dips down a bit and looks up at him from a crooked angle, making you feel that, how weird it is. And the interesting thing here is Roland goes to look, see if there's a car that's been watching him, and we don't get to see what Roland really saw. Was he lying, saying that there wasn't? I wonder. There's got to be a reason they didn't show us it. And while this episode's giving us all this crazy stuff, we jump to the 90s where Amelia's talking at her book event, and then questions are thrown to the floor. And a crazy-eyed man comes up, and he's like, you got any idea where Julie is? Do they? You got any theory here? She pauses, and she's like, are you? And he interrupts her, and he's like, so you don't know nothing. You're just making money and milking their pain. Shame on you, woman. Woo! This guy's literally speaking what Wayne's been thinking this whole time about his wife's book. He's speaking some truth here. And she says dolls. So this is the man who bought the dolls off the doll lady at the fair, saying it was for his niece and nephews. So this has got to be the friend they were going to see. I believe this guy was probably defending their honor here legitimately, the kids, but he led them somewhere down a bad path. Not on purpose. I think he just took a liking to them. So it's going to be interesting where he fits into all this, but he clearly was the owner of those dolls. So now we get a crazy scene here where Tom breaks into the Hoyt properties, and someone's got a cigarette watching him on camera. It was a cool shot, getting excited for who that could be. Tom goes into a creepy basement, opens the door. He's in the pink room, and he's like, oh my God, Julie? And a man appears behind him. Harris James? Crazy. What a cliffhanger. That's a cliffhanger where you're just like screaming at the TV like, no, play the next one. We gotta wait a week now. So that was really fun and an awesome reveal. So this whole Hoyt thing going on with Harris James is a huge operation. And it's something insanely sick. This episode had a lot of meat here, a lot of information. I had to pause it a bunch of times. It was throwing so much at you. It had the quickest pace of any episode. And it was riveting the whole time, making this all start to come full circle. That was another great one. I'm giving this one a 9.5. Entertainment value is high, making you think the whole time. And what's so effective about this season of True Detective is you think you got something figured out like Wayne, and all of a sudden you don't. And they're really good at pulling one on you. So even though we see a lot of information here about Hoyt and the pink room, and kind of getting a good idea of what's going on, who knows what they're going to throw as a zigzag here in the next 2 episodes. I can't wait. I'm enjoying all the acting. The writing's top notch. Please let me know down below any of your theories and what you thought about this episode. I'd love to hear it. I read every comment and try to respond as many as I can. Please follow me at SteveVarley1 on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And please make sure to subscribe. My review of each True Detective episode goes up right after the episode airs, so you don't want to miss one. And I'll see you next time.